I'm Vinny Politan. Great to have you with us here for closing arguments. Another big day, another emotional day inside the courtroom down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The Parkland school shooter on trial, literally for his life. He's already admitted to murdering 17 people. He's admitted to the attempted murder of 17 others. But now this jury must decide whether or not to send him to death row or to give him life in prison. Today, more shooting survivors testifying inside the courtroom. You think about the scene that day and what was happening, and now it's a trial. And in most trials, you know, you have a few witnesses that may have been there at the time of the crime. Not in this case. I mean, there's hundreds of people there. Hundreds. I mean, you've got students, teachers huddled in corners, hoping and praying that they survived that moment. And all of them saw and heard something. Some of them got shot and miraculously survived. And the jury is hearing from them because the jury needs to hear from them. This jury has to understand what really happened. They have to. That's the only way that you can judge someone when you're figuring out life or death. First, understand what they did, and then we'll find out who he is. But prosecutors continue today. Let's take a listen.
February 14, 2018, fourth period, was my History of the Holocaust class. Kids were bringing in candy and stuffed animals.
2:35, I remember hearing some shots outside the room. At first, I thought it was just balloons because everybody had balloons because it was Valentine's Day. I saw the shooter coming out of the stairwell.
And it was really seconds later that the barrel of that AR-15 just ambushed our classroom.
And it was just shot after shot after shot. It just never stopped.
Boom, 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 boom. You could feel the vibrations in your chest and in your body.
I was just hiding until I felt myself get hit.
While I was in the hallway, I didn't realize at that moment, but I had been injured in the leg.
I asked someone next to me why my knee was hurting. I couldn't really tell. And then they let me know that I had been shot in the knee.
Two girls next to me, Elena and Alyssa, they were both instantly gone after being wounded.
We had never had a drill or anything to tell us what to do or where to go.
I remember Miss Rioven taking clothes or anything that she could find and coming over and helping to wrap people's wounds.
And I kept thinking about these kids that should not be experiencing this at all.
That's so true. So true. Let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Julie Janae, who's joining us live tonight from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Julie, first question I have for you is, it's child after child, and I'm calling them children. They're older now. I get it. In my eyes, they're still children, but child after child, student after student, teacher after teacher coming in. How is this being coordinated inside the courtroom? Is there a waiting area where they're all together and then they're brought in one at a time? Explain that to us.
It feels very organized inside of the courtroom. There's several staff members there in the courthouse who go and fetch essentially the witnesses to bring them in, but they also come in with their loved ones. So you can imagine a group of people each time coming in, and some sitting in the gallery and the other going to the stand to testify. There are rooms in a hallway that's nearby where we notice everyone congregating, especially when a court has let out for a break. That's where they're talking, they're sharing hugs, and they are getting that support, but it is very organized in the way that they are bringing in each of these witnesses, and we heard from so many today. We're up to witness 39 here on day 3, Vinny.
And, you know, I'm wondering if are the witnesses, and witnesses, I guess, can't speak to one another, so they're probably keeping them apart, but I just, to see, I guess, even if they see each other's faces, if they haven't seen each other in a while, it's a strange situation and extremely sad. All right, let's talk about what happened in court today. Now, the defense made a motion this afternoon, a significant one. What can you tell us?
They did, and overall in this trial, they stay pretty quiet when the jury is there in the courtroom. They don't cross-examine many of these witnesses. They do take objections or voice their objections to some of these exhibits going in, but they also, outside of the jury's presence, when they're just in front of the judge, they are the ones who are making the noise. They have issues with the way these witnesses are testifying. Take a listen to one of the motions that was made outside of the jury's presence today.
With respect to the remaining attempted murder victims, and we did not previously object to this. We're trying to be respectful with people in the courtroom, but the testimony that they're being asked to give regarding the long-term effects of their injuries or the number of surgeries that they had, we are concerned that there might be an attempted murder victim testifying this afternoon that intends to show the jury the wounds. That is not relevant to put the crime in context or prove an aggravating factor. Mr. Cruz has pled to 34 counts, 17 of them attempted murder. So he has admitted to shooting them with his firearm. And even if this court found some relevance to whether they still have pains from it or how many surgeries, the probative value of that is far outweighed by the prejudice.
Assistant Public Defender there making that argument about these witnesses not being able to talk about how long they've been suffering or what they are still suffering from in relation to that shooting. The judge saying it's probative, doesn't understand why it wouldn't go to one of these aggravating factors about heinous, cruel, and atrocious. But that's really what we've often been seeing, that these attorneys are making those arguments. They want to preserve the record because they know in this case very likely there will be a need for an appeal, Vinny.
Okay, there was a witness today who, the day of the shooting, apparently spoke with the Parkland shooter after he had killed 17 people, after he had shot 17 others, when he took off the gear and tried to blend in with everyone. Tell us about that.
Nicolette Machada, she was an emotional and moving witness. She was the last one of the day. She was actually number 37. I think I said 39 earlier, but she was number 37. That's how many witnesses they've had so far. She's a criminal justice major now in college, but then she was a high schooler who ran out. She wasn't one of the ones injured, but she was in that line with police when they were corralling the students to safety. Take a listen to what she said about the defendant.
I see him and I turned around and, I hadn't seen him in years. I spent the first 2 years at another school, so my last 2 years were at Stoneman Douglas. Looking back, obviously had no idea. I turned around and I realized he was standing with another friend of mine. When I realized that, we kind of collided in the line, so we became one line. When we became one line, I said hi, he said hi back, and I said, you have any college plans? And he said, somewhere in Florida. At that time, we got filed into one line. He was right behind me. And at that time, I was still trying to find friends of mine. I was on the phone with my mom, hysterically.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
No, I was going to ask you, remember what he was wearing?
He's wearing a maroon JROTC shirt, and I don't remember the pants. I just saw the top. I never.
Was it a maroon ROTC shirt from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas?
Yes.
Okay.
Such difficult testimony to listen to. During her testimony, she was asked to identify the person that she saw that day. She stood to point out the defendant there at the defense table. One of the things that she was not asked about specifically, but it had been argued over, was whether or not she could talk about the lack of emotion she saw in his face during that exchange. The defense said it didn't go to any of the aggravators because it only went to his lack of remorse, and it was something that happened afterward. But really, prosecutors didn't elicit that testimony from her once she was on the stand, Vinny.
Difficult, you say, and my understanding is that there are some therapy dogs who are at the courtroom there to help some of these victims. And what can you tell us about that? And did you speak with the handler?
Vinny, I did get a chance to speak with the handlers of these certified therapy dogs. They have been brought in specifically for cases like this. It really is a heartening thing to see them walking through the halls. I've seen more and more each day. There were 2 the first day that I noticed, 3. Now there are 4. That's Sophie there, and one is named Romeo, the other Chicho. Talk to Alan Levine. He is the founder, leader of this organization. There were several there working. He talked about the response that they're getting from those witnesses who come into the courtroom for this type of testimony.
Not only are we out there waiting in the witness rooms, but the witnesses and anybody who's about to testify is invited to request the dog to be with them on the witness stand. And we would, of course, accompany them as their controller so they can comfort it. And then we actually brought a couple of dolls that were modeled after Sophie and Romeo that if they like, they can also, you know, a very tactile kind of soothing distraction kind of displacement activity. So absolutely, we can be there before the witnesses, although we don't want too much interaction beforehand with the witnesses. But afterwards, if they need to decompress, we're right there for them.
And that hallway that we were talking about earlier, Vinny, where these witnesses are hanging out afterward or the members of the family are hanging out during breaks, that's when you see those dogs. They're petting them. They're all talking. And sometimes you see really jovial moments and hugs between everyone. And then those pets on the canine comfort animals.
Yeah, the preparation, the thoughtfulness that we're seeing down in Fort Lauderdale is really pretty amazing. Julie Janae, Court TV legal correspondent, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's bring in our think tank tonight. Joining us in Atlanta, Georgia, criminal defense attorney Eklund Mercy. In Alma, Arkansas, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, former trial attorney Carrie Jernigan. You can check her out on TikTok at Carrie Jernigan1. Not 2, but 1. She's number 1. Also with us, the attorney who represented Jodi Arias and the author of the book series Trapped with Ms. Arias. Kirk Nurmi is with us. Great to see everyone tonight. Eklund Mercy. Why? The defense. Oh, no, please don't show the jury the injuries caused by our client. Come on, Eklund. A little bit of truth. Can we have some truth in the courtroom? Can the jury please be exposed to what actually happened to the victims who were shot by the defendant?
Well, you know, the defense has to do their job, so they have to make the objection. I personally think that it was necessary as a society. I think that people need to see the injuries that these military-grade weapons can inflict on children and what it looks like. And it's not a video game. This is not fake. This is not Netflix. These are classmates of these witnesses. These are people's, the same hand that used to be raised for questions are now laying lifeless. They have to slip on people's blood. Like, they really need to see what actually happened, and he needs to be held accountable for his actual, for his actual plea. He pled guilty, so he knew that this was coming. I can see why the defense did what they did, but it's necessary. The pictures are necessary.
Folks, are you hearing this? I think Eklund is agreeing with me. Let's just savor the moment.
It's a short moment.
Let's savor the moment. Carrie, the actions of the shooter after he murders 17 innocent people and tries to murder another 17, to me, are very telling. Takes off the gear, blends right in with the students, had all this planned, had it all mapped out. This puts, from my perspective, puts him in that column of a cold, calculated, planning, murderous person who fits the description of what I call the worst of the worst.
And that is exactly why the aggravating factors, cold, calculated, and premeditated, that is why so much of this evidence they're arguing, that's prejudicial. There could not be any substantial value to this, but that is why you have to show cold, calculated, and premeditated. And that is why his actions after are so important to the state, because you need 12 unanimous jurors to say there was at least one aggravating factor, and then they can return the death penalty.
Kirk Nurmi, I've covered many death penalty cases, and I always bring it down to, I think the jury follows the law absolutely. Florida has made it much more difficult these days to actually get the death penalty. For someone to get it, it's much more difficult than it used to be. They've changed some of the rules and the procedures, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I think a jury looks at a case and says, okay, is this the worst of the worst? I mean, the judge isn't going to instruct anyone that way, but that's like the gut feeling you get. And I am trying to imagine something worse. I mean, this wasn't a spur of the moment. This wasn't any heat of passion. This was planned, calculated, even planning out the escape route. A lot of times in these murder cases, we don't see anyone planning their escape from everything. But he had it all plotted out, Kirk. That tells me one thing and one thing only. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew why he was doing it. And he knew the carnage he would create.
Well, Vinny, that may be true. He may be the worst of the worst, but that's only half the equation, right? The other half of the equation is they have to consider who the human being is. They have to consider his life from conception to the day of the sentencing, as a matter of fact. So that's what the Supreme Court requires, and that's what you talk about being harder. That's complying with Supreme Court precedent. And we have these issues, you know, where Eklund's agreeing with you about these pictures and everything, but these objections are well taken because the state of the law now, when we talk about cumulative evidence, might change down the road, because keep in mind, any sentence imposed upon Mr. Cruz is going to be the first word. It's not going to be the last word. The execution won't be for 10, 12 years on average later, and the state of the law can change. We've seen Supreme Court precedent change. So the defense here is going to have to be mindful to try to keep him out of the category of the worst of the worst. But again, with the time frame that is only half the equation, that the jury under the law for a sentence of death to be valid has to give meaningful consideration to those mitigating factors. And that's why we're seeing the defense not put on too much now, because they want them to look at their client as a human being, not as a killer.
And that'll be the focus of their case, which is going to take weeks and weeks to go through the life of the Parkland school shooter. And we'll see. I know he didn't have the best of lives, but you know where he was at that point of his life, and what actually motivated this mass murder, I think will be crucial in this case.